Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we are going to do some more review for the AP test. I do want to go over a couple things from yesterday. For those of you who tried to get on early in the day and do the demo module that they had posted out there, they had not sent you an email. It looks like that email went out about 4 o'clock yesterday or a little bit before that. So there should have been an email that you received. If you didn't get it, not a huge deal. You should be able to access either the test through either the email or through your AP Classroom. I know a lot of people were able to find that once that email was posted. People had a lot more success with that in the evening than they did in the morning before that email was sent out. So that's the way the test will be delivered. So your test is on Monday at 4 o'clock. They have said that they will send out exam tickets 2 days in advance. Given what we saw today, I'm guessing that 2 days means exactly 2 days in advance. So roughly Saturday at 4 o'clock. So Saturday at 4 o'clock, I'm not giving you guys homework for this weekend, but what I would like for you to do at some point this weekend is to please check your email or your AP Classroom to make sure that you have the exam ticket, the invitation that they've sent you that will have your AP ID number on it that you'll need to take the AP test. That test is going to be Monday at 4 o'clock. So please make sure that you do that sometime this weekend. Don't learn on Monday at 3:30 in the afternoon that, oh yeah, I never got anything. I can't access the test because I don't know if I'll be able to do anything about it at that point. So check this weekend if for some reason you don't have that email sent to you or you don't have access through AP Classroom to the test. Please let me know ASAP. Mr. Summer and I, you guys are the very first test that Northmont will be giving for our 2 weeks of AP testing. So Mr. Summer and I are kind of on standby to contact the College Board if need be, if a lot of students can't access this. So that's the big thing I want you guys to pay attention to this weekend. I had a couple people ask me about the demo yesterday, thinking that it was going to be an actual practice test, and I thought it was going to be as well, so that was something that was not communicated well by the College Board, that it was just going to be some fake demo type thing. Now, it is good in that it allows you to see if your software will work for that device. So if your software works for that device, you're in good shape in that you can use that device to take the test when you do it. Now, if you want actual practice tests, there are 2 that are going to be available that are actually timed that you can kind of see what you are in for. So what I did is I Googled AP Government, and it takes me to this page right here, okay? And if you want these practice tests, and I would strongly recommend everybody go out to the site at some point, even if you're not planning to take the hour-long practice test. Okay, if you scroll down the page here, it's got a lot of information for you here. Now, I'm going to click first on this link that says AP Updates for Schools Impacted by Coronavirus. So if I click right there, it's going to take me off to a separate page, and it's going to give all sorts of changes that have been made this year. I'm going to go down to the section where it says for AP students, and I'm going to click on Information for Students. And it's going to take me out again to a bunch more information that you can feel free to read at your leisure if you so choose. But really what I want you to take you down to is the online AP courses. Since roughly the end of March, there have been teachers online who have been teaching teaching the material as a review for pretty much every unit in the class. So if you click on this Watch on YouTube link here, it's going to take me out to a YouTube channel, and this is going to have all of the different review things on it. So this is just the link to AP reviews in general. But if you scroll down, okay, and again, if you're taking any AP classes, they are doing this. So there are timed practice tests out there for calculus and for biology and for chemistry and for everything else. If those teachers have not communicated this with you, it is out there, and I would strongly recommend that you take a look at it. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to AP Government and Politics, and you can see that there's 34 review videos that they've shot out here for you guys. So obviously, they finished up the course. They did some review videos on Unit 5, which is not going to be specifically on the test. But here are videos over Unit 1. So there's review videos over democracy, relationship between federal and state government. Okay, Unit 2, Congress, the presidency, judicial branch, so the 3 branches of government. Unit 3, okay, these are our civil rights, civil liberties, selective incorporation, all those things right there. Okay, now if you scroll down here to the bottom, what you can see is that they have here the fifth video from the bottom here, it says timed AP practice number 1. Now, what this video is, it's an hour-long video, and what they do is they start by giving you a little feedback as to the best ways to go about taking this AP test, and then it's going to give you a question. It's going to basically put up a 25-minute clock, ask you to write for 25 minutes. It's going to ask you to stop, copy over to something, and then it doesn't actually give you anything to paste it into. You did that with the demo. You can access the demo still, so if you wanted to go out to the demo site again, paste it into the demo thing, make sure you can get everything put over there. That would be good. They did the timed practice yesterday on Monday, so today at 3 o'clock, they're going to have the answers to that. So this fourth video from the bottom, which I'm shooting this video for you guys, it's Monday night still. On Tuesday at 3 o'clock, they're going to post the answers to the timed review that they gave on Monday and go over what you should have said, the way you get full points on these questions, things like that. They're going to give another timed review tomorrow on Wednesday at 3 o'clock. The video will appear here after that's over, so you don't have to do it exactly 3 o'clock. And then on Thursday, they'll give the answers to that. So if you want to get some actual practice questions that are going to look exactly like the ones that are going to look on the actual test, they did one yesterday. Okay, it's out there for you today to access. They're going to do another one for you tomorrow. So all of those are there. I strongly recommend you guys to go out here and take a look at these videos. These are very, very good. Okay, some of the review stuff is a little bit old in terms of I don't want to say old, but it's stuff that is not necessarily going to be on the test with Unit 5. Now, you are free to use any of that stuff from Units 4 and 5 on the test. That's absolutely fair game. You can definitely use those in answers, and there's a chance that they could reference some of those things in questions, but the questions can be answered without specific knowledge of those things. Okay, now, what we're going to do today is we're going to start going over a little bit more with Unit 1, but I want to kind of draw your attention back to some things I talked about yesterday. Okay, so out on my website, if you click on the class, up at the top left, there's a link for AP Review. Out there is the required foundational documents. If I was you, I would print this out, and I would have this sitting next to you when you go to take the AP test. So this is just a little 2-pager, okay, front and back. You are free to take notes, put additional notes on these things. These are the 9 required documents that you're going to be asked to use to answer the argumentative essay. So one of the 2 documents that you cite has to be one of these. Now, they're probably going to tell you which one to use. They're going to give you a couple options as to what that's going to be. But having they just mentioned Federalist 51. Crap, what's Federalist 51? Okay, it was checks and balances. So that way you can kind of know how to spin your response in terms of what you're going to say in case you happen to freeze up when you see something. So you're not having to go online and try to look up a bunch of stuff while that clock ticks down those 25 minutes. So it might be helpful to have some of these little review sheets sitting there next to you. So this would be definitely one that I would print out. Again, I will caution you to not take any verbiage off of here word for word, because if you do and another student does that and they run your exams, then they're going to get you guys for plagiarism. So anything that you use, whether it's a definition from the book, one of my PowerPoints, this document right here, put it into your own words, because if it's not in your own words, they can get you for plagiarism. I don't want that to happen to anybody, particularly somebody who just makes a mistake and doesn't reword something because you're in a rush and you're trying to get everything done at the last minute. Okay, so there were a few of you who did not do the demo yesterday. It looks like it'll still be up today. If you did not do the demo yesterday, this is not something that you can do a week later. I think they're going to take it down. So I would strongly recommend, if you know anybody who is behind on work, please encourage them to go out there and do that demo just to make sure that they can access the test from their device. I know I had one student who couldn't because they had a plug-in. It wasn't in this class, but it was in one of my other classes. They had a plug-in that was blocking things. They were able to disable that, but if that's something you find out on test day, that's obviously going to be problematic. So, but again, this document, very, very important. Now, what I'm going to work through today is I want to go out to the course description. Okay, so I'm out here. I'm out on this AP site. Okay, I went out to the schools impacted by coronavirus. Now I'm going to click on this middle thing. Okay, this document, which is our AP Government and Politics course and exam description. Now, what this is going to take me out to is this monstrously long 188-page document. Now, you do not have to read this 188-page document. what I would suggest that you do is to go through units 1 through 3 and to make sure that you are familiar with the content. Now, what I'm going to start doing today, and I'm going to do this throughout the rest of the week, is I'm going to review things from these units. Now, some of this stuff you're already going to know. I'm just going to go over some of the basics. I want to make sure that the terminology is fresh in your mind. In your binders, if you did a good job with the notes that you took in your binders, please read through stuff in units 1 through 3. Those are tabs 1 through 3 in your binders. That should have everything that you need. Go back through those tests, particularly the extended responses that I gave you, how a bill becomes a law, the linkages between the presidency and Congress and judiciary. That's really, really key to Unit 2. So that's going to be stuff that I would expect to see on this test. Okay, but today we're going to start through Unit 1, so Foundations of American Democracy. Just going to kind of scroll down here. It's got some information. And the three big things they want you to be able to answer as we go through this unit, and these could be things that you could see on this test. First, why are there debates about the balance of power between the federal and state governments? We've talked all year about things that are federal powers, things that are state powers, and we have these levels of government that are there to protect us from the other one. And if you remember kind of the discussions from the Federalist Papers, was that if the federal government is taking away your rights, the state government can protect you. If your state government's taking away your rights, the federal government can protect you. So we've had this balancing act that we've been trying to walk since the writing of the Constitution about what is the right power between these two levels of government. The second big idea is the Bill of Rights necessary? Why or why not? We did this in our Federalist versus Anti-Federalist debate at the beginning of the year. We looked at this idea of the Bill of Rights. Is the Bill of Rights something that was needed to spell out our specific rights, or was it just kind of intuitively there? And that was obviously the Federalist argument that we didn't need that when we were having the discussion. And then finally, how does the Constitution affect you and the choices that you make? Now, that may seem like a very vague question, but that seems to me like the type of question they might ask on this year's AP test. And not that question directly, but they could give you some sort of scenario, and particularly looking at today, that if you look at some of the protests that are happening about reopening states, and that could be something that's a constitutional right that people have to protest. But state governments, because they are responsible for health, safety, and welfare, they have the constitutional right, 10th Amendment, to be able to do what they want as it relates to the state, if it's something that has to do with health, safety, and welfare, which is exactly what this coronavirus issue is. So you have these two conflicting rights. You have the right of people to protest, and you have the right of the state government to make decisions as it pertains to the health and safety of that state. So these ideas and the choices that you make and the choices that government allows you to make in a crisis like this are significant. So this unit kind of forces you to kind of think about some of those ideas. Now, it starts off, there are 9 topics, essentially, in this unit. Each one of them will have some ideas of things that it wants you to kind of think about. We're going to do a couple of these today. We're not going to obviously get through all of this today. I don't want to have this be an hour-long video. But over the next couple days, I will break down these first 3 units and make sure that we have everything covered before you get to the test. Okay, so we're going to start with 1.1. And this is the idea of ideals of democracy. So the big idea here, it says a balance between government power and individual rights has been the hallmark of American political development. That's exactly what we were just talking about here, is you have to kind of balance individuals' rights to liberties and freedoms versus the government's power to keep us safe and the government's responsibility to keep us safe. So the learning objective here was to explain how democratic ideals are reflected in the Declaration and the Constitution. Now, obviously, these are 2 of the required documents that I referenced a second ago that you need to be able to explain as we get to the test. So obviously, in the Declaration of Independence, when Jefferson wrote the Declaration, one of the big things he was focusing on was this idea of natural rights, rights that people have that government can't take away from you. So you see here under essential knowledge on the right side here, it says the U.S. government is based on ideas of limited government, including natural rights, popular sovereignty, republicanism, and the social contract. And I'll go through each of those terms here in a second. Declaration was drafted by Jefferson. Obviously, you should know that Jefferson wrote the Declaration with assistance, and it provided a foundation for popular sovereignty. So popular sovereignty is the right of people to vote and make decisions about their government. government. So one of the big things you see today, particularly when you see this debate about opening up states, is that you have Governor DeWine, who was elected by the citizens of Ohio, making decisions. And that's the idea of popular sovereignty, is that if whether you're happy or unhappy with what those decisions happen to be, he's an elected official. Okay, if you don't like the decisions you make, vote him out. That's the whole idea of a representative democracy, is that you let people to make decisions for you. And if you like their decisions, great, keep them in power. If you don't like their decisions, great, vote them out. Okay, it's that simple. So popular sovereignty, the right of people to make those decisions. Now, natural rights, if you remember, one of the big discussions in the Declaration was that natural rights was this idea of life, liberty, and property, or the way that Jefferson termed it, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And these are rights that come to us from God and not from the government, and that government should never be able to take those things away. So when you look at the American relationship with Great Britain prior to the American Revolution, those were things that were being taken away from us, at least in the eyes of the colonists, is that Britain was taking away our life, liberty, and property. So that was part of the reason that we rose up against the British, was this idea of taking away natural rights. Republicanism, or a republican form of government, it has nothing to do with the Republican Party. A republic is any government in which people elect their leaders. And the thing with Great Britain, obviously they elected their parliament, but that parliament at the time was subject to the actions of the king. Now today the British monarch is considerably weaker than they were back 250 years ago. But the whole idea of a republican government is that people elect people to make decisions for them. And if you don't like those decisions that are made, you can vote those people out. Okay. And that idea of a social contract, that's the last part. The idea of a social contract kind of goes back to this idea that people sign essentially this social contract with government in which you agree to give up some of your freedoms in return for government protecting you. Okay, there are laws that we all have to abide by on a day-to-day basis, and in return for us abiding by those laws, we get things in return from the government. And we have this unsigned agreement that we have with the government that we'll obey their laws, and we expect certain things in return, whether that be from our tax revenue or other things like that. So this is the idea of the social contract. So all of those things were essential to the writing of either the Declaration or the Constitution, and you see those pieces of information in there. So if you don't remember the basics of those two documents, particularly the Declaration of Independence, I'm hoping at this point you know what's in the Constitution, particularly in the amendments and the articles, because we've had at least 7 quizzes on those before we left. That's obviously very important. But the Declaration is the one that we didn't really talk a ton about in here, except for very briefly at the beginning of the year when we kind of talked about the reasons why we broke from Great Britain and the things that Jefferson wrote into that document. So please make sure you're familiar with those terms. So natural rights, popular sovereignty, republican form of government, and social contract. Those were all crucial to the writing of our Constitution and the writing of the Declaration of Independence. Now you can see here on the left, it says classroom resources, analytical reading, Declaration of Independence. This is one of those assignments that like you did for today, where I had you go through Federal 78. I didn't assign you this one, but if you want to see some short excerpts from the Declaration of the things that they expect you to know, there's a link to it right there. Okay, so you can access that, take a look at that, and see what you need to know there. Okay, types of democracies. Now, we talked about these very beginning of the year, and I want to make sure that you remember these ideas. There are 3 essential types of democracies. Now, we have obviously what we call a participatory democracy, a pluralist democracy, and an elite democracy. And we talked about the idea of pluralism earlier in the year. Now, there are other types of democracies. Like on here, we don't have certain things. But it says here, all representative democracies can take several forms. So we're talking about, in general here, representative democracy. So remember, a direct democracy is where everybody votes on everything. Okay, now that's not feasible in the United States. We can't get people to show up to vote just for presidential elections, let alone getting them to vote on everything. So we're talking about a representative democracy, and there's basically 3 forms that a representative democracy can take. The first is what's called a participatory democracy. Okay, in participatory democracy, people participate broadly in politics and other attributes of society. So when I say that people participate broadly, what that means is that people are engaged in government. People are involved with political parties. People are involved with different elements of society and what that looks like, and making decisions within their government. We know that in some attributes there's a segment of the American population that is very active in government, and they're very active in participatory democracy. Our system doesn't necessarily encourage that, because we don't have, for instance, Election Day being a national holiday, because we don't have easy ways for a lot of people to register to vote. People have to register themselves. We don't go out of our way to encourage people to participate in government. If you want to, it's not that hard to, but we don't go out of our way like some countries do to encourage participatory democracy, everybody to be involved. Now, we have a pluralist system to some extent in the United States. Pluralist system, basically, remember we talked about this idea of this competition between different groups means that really anybody can have their interests represented. So if you look at the way that the College Board defines it, it says which recognizes group-based activism, so that could be interest groups, could be political parties, it could be the media, could be any sort of group. Activism by non-governmental interests that are striving to impact political decision-making. So any of these linkage institutions, so we've talked about this here, so whether it be parties or interest groups or whatever the case may be, that seek to impact governmental decision-making, that all falls under this big heading of pluralism or pluralist government. Now, that was an extended response a couple years ago. They gave you a list. This is actually last year's extended response for the argumentative essay. Is they ask about these three types of democracy. So let me finish this last one, and then I'll tell you about that question. The last one is what we call elite democracy or elitism, which says we don't want broad participation. We don't want participatory democracy. We want a democracy that limits participation to the people who are wealthy or in the know or kind of have more of something, whether that be access or money or power or whatever the case may be. We want a smaller percentage of people who are involved. Now, last year's AP test asked people to make the argument that our government was either a pluralist system or an elite system, and why that form was the best way to do things in our country, and to kind of back that up with the documents that you have. So, and it says here, right underneath this, it says different aspects of the U.S. Constitution, as well as the debate between Federalist 10 and Brutus 1, reflect the tension between the participatory model and those other two types, so pluralism or elitism, where it basically says, right, if you remember from Federalist 10, okay, which warned about the dangers of factions, it was warning about why a pluralist democracy is bad. It was warning about why an elite democracy is bad. Now, it was also suggesting that our system of government as we were creating it was the way to counteract that, but it recognized that those concepts were dangerous, and that was one of the big things that Federalist 10 talked about, but why a federal government was best to counter that. Now, Brutus 1 argued, obviously, since this was an anti-federalist paper, that the state government or the smaller levels of government were best situated to handle situations like that. So, again, this is a debate back and forth about which of these types of systems is best. So, the three models, says here, of representative democracy continue to be reflected today. So we see elements of our government in which we have participatory democracy. We see other elements in which pluralism is stronger. We see other elements in which people who have a lot of power and influence are the ones who are making decisions on issues without involving us, or in the process. Okay. All right. Last one of these I'm going to do today talks about some of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Now, you should have notes on this from the very beginning of the year when we did this Federalist, Anti-Federalist debate. So whether you were on which side, you either have elements that are attacking the Articles, or things where you might have been saying, okay, these were good things from the Articles of Confederation that we should try to keep. So when we look at the weaknesses of the Articles, remember, when the Constitutional Convention was convened, the original plan was just to fix elements of the Articles of Confederation. It wasn't necessarily to rewrite the entire document. and to basically come up with an entire new system of government. We were simply going in there to fix it. We realized that there were problems, and we realized that we wanted to fix those problems, but we didn't necessarily think we had to basically scrap the entire thing and start over. Okay, so let's kind of walk back through this idea of strengths versus weaknesses of the Articles. So obviously, weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, there was no strong central government. Every state maintained sovereignty, and because each state had sovereignty, they could really do what they wanted to. They didn't have to really play ball with what the federal government wanted to. Each state had one vote in the legislature, but it took 9 out of 13 votes to pass legislation. Now, at that time, whether you look at a north-south divide or a big-small divide, there weren't 9 votes among either of those any of those categories, so it made it very hard for things to get done. Delegates to the Articles of Confederation government were picked by state legislatures. There was no power to the people, so we really didn't have any real democracy there, except for we elected the state legislatures, and then they picked who the delegates were to this national government. We had no national judiciary, so we had no ability to decide disputes between states or colonies at that time. Because of that, we had states that would often fight each other. Remember, we talked about Pennsylvania and Vermont almost went to war over land near Pittsburgh. Pennsylvania, Virginia almost went to war over Pittsburgh. Vermont threatened to join Canada and just leave the Union altogether as we started to get closer to the writing of the Constitution. So this was something where there were problems. We also needed every single state to amend the Articles of Confederation. So there were all sorts of problems with the Articles of Confederation. Now, what were the good things? What could it do? Also, just as a side, they had no national militia. And we saw the weaknesses of that, if you remember Shays' Rebellion, where we had that incident in Massachusetts where the group fled across state lines, and the state militia couldn't follow them across state lines. So it really reflected the weaknesses of the Articles there. Now, what could the Articles of Confederation do? It did have the power to make peace. That was one of the kind of the saving graces of this. They signed the peace treaty, Treaty of Paris, that ended the American Revolution, so they could do that. They could run a post office. They could coin money, even though we didn't have a lot of money at that time. They could appoint army officers. However, they were still at the kind of the discretion of the colonies or the states to actually give them people to fight in the military, because the states didn't necessarily have to do that. But they could appoint army officers if they had people there. So there were some good things about the Articles. However, there were way more weaknesses than strengths. And because of that, this is what's going to lead to the rewriting of the new Constitution. So you can see here under essential knowledge, let's start with the learning objective. It says, explain how Federalist and Anti-Federalist views on central government and democracy are reflected in our foundational documents, so our Declaration and our Constitution. Now, under essential knowledge here, it says Madison's arguments in Federalist 10 focused on the superiority of a large republic in controlling the mischiefs of factions, as we just talked about, delegating authority to elected representatives, and dispersing power between the state and national government. So the way that we counter factions is we divide power up among a bunch of different people so that no one person has too much power. So if you look at our federal government today, President Trump obviously has power, but he doesn't have unlimited power because Congress can check him. State governments can check him. When the president said, we're going to open up the country, well, that decision is left to state governors. So that's something that the president wants to do, and he doesn't necessarily have the ability to do it. So that's a check that's put on the president by the Constitution. And Madison talked about that. That's one of the things he talked about back in Federalist 10. Now, in Brutus I, the Anti-Federalist papers, they looked at this idea that said small, decentralized republics are best, and looked at the dangers to liberty that come from a large centralized government. Now, their idea was, look, even if we have all of these checks in place, this federal system that we have in place, you could still have a president and Congress that are ultimately able to push the states around. Now, we've talked a lot this year about the different ways that Congress and the president can push the states around, the big part of that being money. We want you to do this, and if you don't do it, we're going to withhold funding from you. So even though there are abilities of states at times to say no, the ability of the federal government to put pressure on the states to do what they want them to do is a significant pull that really forces states to do oftentimes what the feds want, and to give up their powers in the process. So that was one of the things that the Anti-Federalist papers really warned about there. Okay, so again, you can see here on the left side it says additional resource, source analysis and argumentation. This teaches you how to look at different sources that are out there and to argue them. So that's one of the things you're going to have to do on this first extended response question. So there's an optional reading that links here, Letters from the Federal Farmer, number 1, which is another anti-federalist document. Again, when you write this argumentative essay, this first extended response, you're going to have to use one of those required documents, but your second source, whatever that second source happens to be, is completely your choice as to what that source is. So you can use whatever the heck you want. It doesn't have to be one of these required documents. It can really be whatever you want it to be. Okay, I think I'll move on to, I'll just kind of finish this one up here because we already started talking about this, and then I'll wrap up for today. Again, weaknesses of the articles kind of provided a blueprint for our new government that we wanted to lay out. So we talked about some of the weaknesses of the articles. We've discussed that already. Led to the debate over granting the federal government greater powers that were formerly reserved to the states, particularly as it came to trade, particularly as it came to military powers, things like that, to uniform things between the colonies. And then it talks about specific legal challenges. Obviously, Shays' Rebellion was one of the ones that showed the lack of our military. And then it says the lack of tax law enforcement powers, that we couldn't tax. We had no money to do certain things because our federal government lacked the ability to tax. And that was another significant weakness of the Articles of Confederation. Again, over on the side here, it has the analytical reading for the Articles of Confederation. This is not something, again, that I assigned this year. So if you want to take a look at that, it's got some significant things from the articles that they want you to pay attention to. So again, I'm giving you these optional things that you can look at. You don't have to necessarily do these. I'm not taking them for a grade. But you know that the first of your 2 extended responses is going to be that argumentative essay. So the more that you remember, so if you just kind of click on this link for Articles of Confederation and jot down some notes on that document that I told you to print out about the article, some other things that you think you might want to talk about, that's going to benefit you. Now, I want you to kind of think about it this way. We don't know the exact question that they're going to ask you, but we know that ultimately, at the end of the day, that question is going to be able to be answered with one of these 9 documents. Okay, so you could almost, and there's no way you could really do this, but you could almost pre-write some of this stuff. Is that if I need to back something up from the Articles of Confederation, I could jot down some things in advance that I want to say about the Articles of Confederation. I could jot down some things I would say if I'm going to explain something using Federalist 10 or Brutus 1 or whatever the case may be. So there's things that you could do before this test because of the format to kind of do some almost pre-writing of things that help you kind of address some of these topics in advance. And I think that would be something that would be beneficial, whether it's something you use directly or whether it's just something you refer back to while you're trying to write this essay. We'll go back over a couple more concepts from the essay, particularly about writing your thesis statement tomorrow, and then we'll finish up the Unit 1 review tomorrow. So there's no homework for tonight. If you have any missing work that's out, you basically have until Monday of next week to get that done. Monday, May 11th is the last day. That's obviously your AP test day. That's the last day in which I'm allowed to take late work. We have to submit grades shortly thereafter for the quarter. So please make sure that you're getting any late work you have done. I had several people email me saying, I didn't do work for a few days. What do I need to do? All of the assignments are out there in Progress Book. If you did not watch videos for certain days, that's what you need to do. You need to go out to those videos and take a look and make sure that you understand all of that stuff. Okay. If you have any questions, send me an email. Again, today's 6 days away from the test, so we're getting very, very close. So if you have not started to review anything, please start that. I know a lot of you have multiple AP tests that you have to work through. I understand the challenges of that. Trust me, I get it. I've been doing this for a lot of years. I have a lot of students who are taking multiple AP tests. I will tell you that this one is first. It's always first. So get this out of the way, knock this out, and then you can focus on everything else that you need to do.
Correction on something I said earlier. You do have that Federalist 78 assignment that needs to be turned in by the end of the day today. So if you've not already sent that to me, that is the last thing you need for today. Hope everybody has a great day, and I will talk to everybody tomorrow.